Nebraska football's spring game kicks off this Saturday, April 9th at 1 p.m. Eastern Time, which is noon Central Time, which is the time zone that Lincoln, Nebraska is in. As many of you Nebraska fans know, but not every other fan base knows. After all, this is America, which is split into 4 or 5 different time zones, and even Google Maps has to remind us that different time zones exist. Anyway, today we're talking about Nebraska football and previewing the spring game a little bit because there are going to be players that you need to keep an eye on. There are situations when it comes to injuries and roster turnover that might impact how the spring game is played. And we're going to be talking about all of this. I'm going to read you 2 articles that describe the situation of the spring game. One describes the situation regarding how the game is going to be played, the game's format. The other is talking about 3 things to watch during the Huskers spring game. It's by Chris Peterson on Fansided. The other article is by Fan Nation, All Huskers from Sports Illustrated. It's by Joe Hudson. And I'm also going to link an article by the Omaha World Herald that talks about some other things relating to the spring game. It's really just notes on Husker spring ball and how different position groups and different players, mainly players that we haven't heard about, are doing. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. If you are new to this channel, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and click that notification bell so you can get notified when I post new college football content. Now that March Madness is over, there's going to be more football content coming out as I have more time because I no longer am going to do live streams for March Madness games. School ends for me in about a month too, so in the summer I would expect a steadier and larger inflow of content is the best way I can put it. But anyway, on to the nitty-gritty details. So first and foremost, we are going to talk about 3 things to watch during the Huskers spring game. First and foremost is quarterback competition. Frost hasn't said much about the quarterback competition, but he hasn't named a starter. He also hasn't said when he plans to do that, which is not a surprise. This is the article by Fansided. When it comes to quarterback competitions, getting a head coach to name one is like pulling teeth. They are afraid of saying the wrong thing, which could lead to a transfer, although Frost has had quarterbacks transfer right before the season as well, so maybe honesty is the best policy. At any rate, this will be the first extended view Nebraska football fans will get of the Texas transfer Casey Thompson at quarterback. Is he as good as advertised? How is he gelling with new offensive coordinator Mark Whipple? And more importantly, is he an upgrade? These are all things Nebraska football fans want to know. Logan Smothers could also keep the competition interesting with a strong performance, but the key thing was to upgrade the position and cut down on turnovers and things like that. And this will be the first small test. So Casey Thompson and Logan Smothers, I think, are the most interesting cases. I think Chubba Purdy is still recovering from injury. I haven't heard a lot about him in Nebraska football circles at all. And I do think that just seeing how Logan Smothers played this past season in the lone game against Iowa, he looked like a carbon copy of Adrian Martinez. And that might sound like a negative thing, and to a certain degree it is, but the fact that he, I think, is now only a redshirt sophomore as opposed to Adrian Martinez being in his final year of eligibility means he's more malleable, both mentally and physically, to adjust to Whipple's schemes. Smothers this past season had 317 passing yards at Nebraska, no touchdowns, 1 pick. He had a 52.7 QB rating, but a 144.3 passer rating, which for being a redshirt freshman, I think last year, is not bad at all for the roster and supporting cast that he had. Smothers also had 133 rushing yards on 37 attempts for 3.6 yards per carry and 2 rushing touchdowns with a long of 24. And he's an athlete. I think reading his high school statistics and his scouting reports by 24/7 Sports, he ran a fast 40-yard dash. He's mobile, he's athletic, and that's what I was meaning when I was comparing him to Adrian Martinez just a few seconds ago. He looked exactly like Adrian, the exact same quarterback. He's just younger, and that's beneficial. Casey Thompson isn't the exact same athlete from what I understand. Not as fast, not as mobile, but a more proven passer, that is for sure. Casey Thompson this past season, 2021, had 2,113 passing yards, 24 touchdowns, 9 interceptions with a 62.6 QB rating and a 154.7 passer rating, with an average pass of 8.1 yards and a 63.2 completion percentage. I think this is his final year. I think it's his final or second to last year. I can't exactly remember. But he is a veteran. He's proven. He so far looks to be the guy who is going to be QB1, though nothing is determined yet. And I think he will be. And I think he'll be a top 5 Big Ten quarterback. I think that just with the upgrade at wide receiver that he's getting, yes, Samori Toure is gone, but I'd say the overall depth of the wide receiver room, thanks to Trey Palmer coming in, a lot of other returning starters and incoming transfers, and incoming recruits, they say the depth of the wide receiver room has gotten better. The coaching, thanks to incoming wide receivers coach Mickey Joseph, has gotten better as well. It's steadily improved. So I do expect Casey Thompson to have a great year, and I expect him to start. But Logan Smothers, I think, will be the main competition. He provides a different skill set, but still a valuable skill set, one that Nebraska is probably more used to than Casey Thompson. But Thompson also fits more of what Mark Whipple wants to bring to Nebraska. So that's the QB competition, in my opinion, on it. The next one is the running back. It's the next thing to watch out for. Have the Huskers found a running back? While it's fair to criticize Adrian Martinez because his play was far from perfect with the Huskers, the running game didn't do any favors and it hindered him. Martinez was a flawed quarterback, but a powerful run game, and more so a powerful offensive line, would have helped him. Just like Frost tried to address the quarterback position as well as his offensive staff, he also looked for an immediate solution at running back too with JUCO transfer Anthony Grant, who has turned heads during the spring, even impressing Nebraska football defenders. Tommy Hill, who was a cornerback now for the Huskers, transferred in from Arizona State, talked about running back Anthony Grant and said every time he busts a gap, he's gone. I've been trying to get him, but that's a dog right there. He's got vision, speed, he's shifty. I talked to him about his vision. I see him hitting a gap when it's not even developed yet. No matter who the quarterback is, he will need a better running game. The Huskers have added talent at wide receiver, and there's no reason to think the passing game can't be successful, but Nebraska can't be one-dimensional anymore. The offensive line also had a big reason to do with Nebraska's lack of success in the run game. And I don't know, I think the third reason it is actually not the offensive line. That is funny. So what this article here is missing, in my opinion, is the offensive line. The offensive line, and it is going to be somewhat challenging to pay attention to this in the spring game, but an offensive line is also very critical. If Anthony Grant is excellent, but his offensive line is garbage, like this past season, his team will fold against defensively solid teams. They'll have no shot at beating teams like, I guess, probably Oklahoma, Michigan, Wisconsin, Iowa, teams with more talented defensive lines and who are just have solid defenses all around. Teams that will out-talent the Huskers to a certain degree. So offensive line is critical, but I do think running back is critical as well. And adding Anthony Grant was certainly a good decision. He led his team, his JUCO team, to a national title. I think he rushed for like over 1,000 yards. He's tough. He used to play at Florida State as well, recruited, I think, by Jimbo Fisher or Willie Taggart. So he's a nice addition. You also have an incoming transfer from Texas A&M, running back from there. So that's another thing to watch out for on Nebraska. I think quarterback is much more critical, but running back, offensive line is also more critical as well. But running back play is important, and it will be more easily noticed if there is a change there than at the offensive line. Though speaking of the offensive line, I have heard reports, and I might have read and talked about some of this on my channel, how Frost says that he likes what he sees with the offensive line, thinks they're doing better, especially when it comes to just coming off the ball, especially with fundamentals. Frost thinks the offensive line is improving. And finally, number 3, last but not least, which transfers will make the biggest impact? Using the playbook of Michigan State and other teams that have had quick turnarounds, Nebraska football hit the transfer portal hard this offseason, and Saturday's spring game will provide a perfect opportunity to gauge the impact of those additions for next season. Thompson is going to be the focus of many just because he plays quarterback. Grant plays a key position too, but Tommy Hill is a 4-star cornerback transferring from Arizona State, and after some departures in the secondary, it would be great for Nebraska if he can emerge as a starting caliber player. Nebraska football has a number of other transfers that will be making their first impression, and 2 of the most important are at wide receiver, as the Huskers are pretty thin at that position, especially if Trey Palmer from LSU and Isaiah Garcia Castaneda from New Mexico State can't make immediate impacts. There's still plenty of time before the season comes, and a strong showing from returning wideout Omar Manning would also be good. But if the Huskers are going to reach a bowl game in 2022, the passing game needs to improve, and the receivers are a big part of that. Also for Nebraska, let's just quickly look at their transfer portal recruiting class. They had 11 incoming transfers this past season from their recruiting class, the 2022 recruiting class. They had Omar Brown at cornerback as well, who will help with the secondary. Chubba Purdy at quarterback. DeAndre Jackson was the running back from Texas A&M I was mentioning earlier. Kevin Williams on the offensive line. Now, I think his team took a year off of football and he didn't play, but from what I heard too, he's really impressing everyone. Most of the transfers are doing phenomenal, and to a good degree, it sounds like that they are outplaying Nebraska's own players that they've been developing for years and recruited from high school, which speaks volumes as to how badly Nebraska has recruited and developed its players over the past few years. But having incoming transfers to fix the problem, to catch Nebraska up to speed, is a great thing. More importantly than, I would say, wide receivers, though wide receivers are important, are special teams. Nebraska was awful at special teams this past season, but luckily they are bringing in Timmy Bleekrode from Furman, who both kicked field goals and punted, very good at those. I think he might have been the kicker of the year. And Nebraska is also bringing in Brian Buschini, a punter from Montana, who was a good punter in the FCS as well. So those are some other names that I think should be looked out for, are the kicker, the punter, Kevin Williams, if indeed he does play. But impact transfers all around. If Nebraska's impact transfers do not have an immediately positive effect on the program, and Frost is canned, if we're just going to go there, this past recruiting class is going to have a negative impact on Nebraska's future, because when you look at the numbers from the recruiting class, the level of talent Frost and his staff signed, this is a big underscore from what Nebraska typically has as a recruiting class, and Frost obviously sacrificed recruiting high schoolers to get what he thought could give his team some immediate gains, because he's trying to win at all costs. So it's a risky move, but it's also a move that I think, personally, from my opinion, is going to pay off big dividends. So now that we're off of that, we're done talking about the 3 big points, which again, quarterback play, running back play, incoming transfer play. We're now going to talk about the format of the game, and we're going to talk about this a little less than usual, but I'm going to go to an article by Fan Nation and talk about how injuries may force change in the spring games format. Traditionally, from my understanding, it's red versus white, and that's how it's been with Nebraska. Nebraska also has insanely high attendance at spring games, too. They have one of the best fan bases in the country. You could argue they're the most passionate. I mean, who else? What other fan base fills their stadium to the brim, where it is overflowing, where red is pouring out of all sides of the stadium, and your team goes 3-9? No other fan base does that. None. 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 Very few. Probably not none, but very few. But the offense versus defense is definitely a possibility this year. And the format hasn't even been determined yet. I've looked at multiple headline articles. It may not be determined until Saturday itself. Coach Frost said after Monday's practice that he'd prefer the traditional full two-team format of Reds versus Whites, but that might not be doable because of injuries. A possible alternative would be an offense versus defense setup similar to what was used in the 2014 spring game. Regardless of the game's format, quote, "A lot of the stuff we're doing now isn't on tape, so we certainly don't want to show many of our cards, but guys are going to want to compete and run plays, and defense is going to want to work, so we'll find a balance." As far for the team's overall progress, Frost said, "We've gotten a lot better at a lot of things. There's still some things I'm not happy about that we need to get cleaned up. That's spring ball in a nutshell." It's, typical coaching talk. Not really going to go into details, but there is, I think, in those words, there's some encouragement, there's some improvement, but the team is not where he wants it to be. The offense didn't have one of its better days Monday, Frost said. "We need to execute a little bit better. We're doing some simple things a lot better," he said. Much more from Monday's post-media availability, including comments from Husker newcomers, is in the link below. Whatever. So, what I can gather from this, plenty of injuries. I think Xavier Betts is another example of, he's not an injury, but he's just not with the team due to unknown reasons, possibly academic reasons. And the wide receiver room is already pretty thin. And with plenty of injuries, I think Turner Corcoran is still suffering from an injury. Thomas Fidone, the tight end, is also suffering from an injury, which Frost declined to comment on. I imagine there are so many others. Actually, I know that there are so many others. I just can't remember their individual names. But there are a lot of different guys recovering. Nebraska, while they brought in a lot of transfers, also lost quite a bit of transfers. Like Feldarius Payne is a perfect example of that. Same with Adrian Martinez, which is, kind of a duh at this point, but it's still worth mentioning it if you're going to talk about outgoing transfers. So red versus white is obviously the preferred format. And actually comment your thoughts down below whether you would prefer, whether you're a Nebraska fan or not, an offense versus defense or a red versus white format. I imagine most of you are going to prefer red v white. I myself like it when both teams play offense and defense because it reminds me of a more traditional football game. But offense versus defense, I can also see the benefits of that. But it sounds like offense versus defense is only going to be used if it is by far the most practical and safe option. Most effective as well. Can't forget that. But red versus white is obviously preferred. And I don't know if we're going to have an official announcement or if any announcement is going to be made on the format of the game until the game itself on April 9th, this Saturday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time, noon Central Time. And that's really all I have to say for this video. I'd say during the spring game, things I'm going to look out for is trench play, both on defensive line and offensive line, because Nebraska's losing a lot from both of those. And yes, they return, I think, the majority of their starters on the O-line, but the O-line last year was not good. So I'm looking for improvements on the O-line. I'm looking for improvements on the D-line. I'm pretty confident in the linebacker play and relatively even in the secondary play. Bringing in Tommy Hill and Omar Brown to fill voids in the secondary. You return guys like Miles Farmer. There are other guys as well. The cornerbacks coach is a very solid guy. Same thing with the linebackers coach. Defense overall was solid last year, but I'm mainly looking at the trench play from both defensive line, offensive line, and the offense all around. It's trench play and the offense is what I'm looking at. And with offense, I'm looking for more consistency, which again directly relates to the spine of the offense, which is the offensive line. If you do not have a good offensive line, your offense cannot be consistent. Nebraska's offense last year, which was, I think they had a lot of big plays, but again, not an efficient or consistent offense despite their big plays, and the offensive line at the end of the day burned them in just about every game. So trench play is my main focus. Quarterback, 2. Quarterback's probably the main one for most people. But that's all I have to say in this video. If you like this video, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, click the notification bell, and comment your thoughts on Nebraska's spring game down below. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you guys around. Bye.